welcome to the podcast. Today, we have with us Andrew Cole, who's a veteran with over 35 years of experience in the financial services industry, having worked all over in the UK, Europe, Hong Kong, as well as in the Middle East. And he has held senior management positions with very large, well-respected firms on the insurance side, as well as having set up his own distribution brokerage in the UAE. He is results-driven and believes in working hard and smart, but not forgetting to enjoy the journey. He is also a published author with a book, The Diamond Method, which I'm sure we'll delve into a little bit at some point of the conversation today. He has 3 children who grew up here in the UAE and is very proud of the achievements to date. Andy, welcome to the show.
Absolute pleasure.
Thank you for being with us. And our topic today is to be able to have a look at and discuss 7 steps, essentially, that we like to boil it down to becoming a financial advisor in the UAE or in this market. The skills typically would scale across and would sort of port across different geographies, I'm sure. Do you see that as a difference between all of the places that you've been and the UAE? Are there very big differences in the skill set that is required?
Interestingly, no. I think there are maybe slight differences with regards to maybe regulation and understanding the products. Maybe the products might vary, but the basic principles of being successful in the financial services industry, to be honest, no matter where you are in the world, they're the same. They really are the same.
Yeah. No, that's good to know. It's comforting that the skills are portable and the basic principles and the foundations, of course, remain largely the same. And like you said, some nuances with regard to the regulation and with regard to the local law probably apply. Let's dive straight into it. You've obviously not just hired many advisors, but also helped train, develop, and coach them. Where did we start? I mean, how do you get started? What is the sense that you would like to give to someone who is looking to join the profession for the first time?
I think a lot of people enter the industry not necessarily by choice, but they sort of fall into it by accident sometimes, and that's interesting. But there are certain traits that seem to stand out, the ones that become successful, and I think that it's people that are definitely driven, that are self-driven, self-disciplined, tend to do better. Suddenly having the freedom of being maybe a self-employed financial advisor without having to, come in on a certain time and leave at a certain time, and running your own business within a business. There's certain characteristics and traits that you would need to be successful. So I think that's quite key, being that self-driven, self-disciplined. If you're not self-driven and disciplined, then you'd struggle, really, to be honest. In the industry. However, if you've got those qualities and the ability to learn and develop, then this is a fantastic industry to be in for sure. So I think that also comes down to our ability to attract the right people in the industry, and that's also key, because a lot of the times the actual interviewee needs to be interviewed properly to give them the opportunity to demonstrate their ability that could bring them into this industry. So that's another key point I've noticed, having the right people in recruitment to attract the right people into the business at the very start.
Sure. That sounds very interesting. And if we dig a little more, one of the first things that I remember, questions that sort of came up or that tend to come up is, what are the qualifications? So is a degree important? If it is, what kind of degrees? And, what is the sort of pathway that someone should look at if they're serious about this profession?
Yeah, I mean, obviously over the 35, 36 years that I've been in the industry, there's been a lot of changes, especially around qualifications. We saw in the late 80s and early 90s in the UK that qualification came in as a regulatory requirement. So you did see a massive increase in education, which I think is always a good thing. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But as you move around the world, you do notice that different regulations, as we know in UAE, there are no formal qualifications required to be in the financial services industry. However, it does help you to get your visa if you do have a degree. And as I say to my children, always get a degree, because there's nothing wrong with having that right, having those qualifications behind you anyway. But there are no qualifications that are very specific to our industry in many of the universities around the world. There are qualifications that could be used, but what we find is that most of the main qualifications are qualifications that are not tertiary. They're qualifications that you can do after you leave mainstream education. So CII, for instance, Chartered Insurance Institute, London, are very renowned for their qualifications, as are LIMRA in the USA. So there are 2 or 3 bodies that are recognised worldwide, and these are the type of companies that we tend to go to for our qualifications for future development.
No, I think thank you for that. There was. And there's an interesting, I think there are 2 bodies that of great interest in the financial services profession. One, of course, you mentioned the CII, and the other, I think, is the CFP sort of degree, which is a longer term professional qualification. Both are chartered degrees, and I'd like to sort of pick your thoughts on the benefits of these being chartered degrees. I mean, do you see that as an advantage, and how does that sort of help the advisor as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think, as I said before, I mean, I'm a great believer in education and developing yourself. So I think that if you're dealing with customers with high net worth clients, they will probably look at your qualifications. They'll want to know that you're a qualified individual, to trust them with your hard-earned income, your company income, capital and profits. You would probably look for that. So it probably would help you develop your credibility, the trust with your high net worth, with the right qualifications, for sure. That doesn't mean to say that you cannot study and become an expert in your particular field or specialize in a particular area without a degree. Of course you can. There's nothing stopping you at all. So it depends on your ability to build trust and to network in the right areas. So it certainly wouldn't hold you back by not having a degree in this industry. But at the same time, I would also advocate that if you can get the qualification, please, go for it. Yeah.
No. So what I was referring to and I was coming from was that compared to the mainstream sort of education, a chartered degree does, to my mind, at least brings in a little bit of, continuous development. And they have a requirement that if you want to maintain your qualification, you have to keep studying, or you have to keep practicing and sort of prove that that you're current in the profession, which is very important for something like financial services. And for advisors. So yeah, that was something that was very interesting for me to learn as well.
Yes, I think in most professions, there is a degree of relearning and redevelopment, to maintain your licensing. I would like to see that come into the UAE one day, where first of all they will ask for people in our industry to have a qualification. And then secondly, for that qualification then to be kept up to date, maybe on an annual or a biannual basis. I think that's very important.
Yeah, no, absolutely. All right. In terms of being able to or wanting to be able to excel in this profession, how do you go up the ladder? What is your advice to someone who started out and, let's say he's the first year in the profession, he's come in and he's trying to get a book and he's trying to grow. So how would you advise that he starts?
Okay. Again, it's like I use the analogy of building a tower block. If you're going to build a very tall tower block, you need very deep foundations. And the taller you want your tower block to be, the deeper the foundations need to be. So if you want to grow and you want to develop, you need very deep foundations. So the foundations for us obviously is along the lines of having the right attitude. Is number one. I think if you don't have the right attitude, no matter what you do in life, you will never reach your full potential. So working on attitude, working on making sure we're positive every day, and that can take some time to sort of look at and read the right books, listen to the right podcasts, that sort of thing. Keep yourself motivated. Activity. Everything comes with activity. Without activity, we don't learn anything. So whether it's our knowledge or our skills, it's driven by activity, right? We have to take the time to develop ourselves. So when someone comes into this industry or any industry, we have to learn the basics very, very well. They have to be so good that it's like driving a car. It becomes subconscious. You get in the car and you just drive, right? You start off, you don't know, you forget where the gear is, looking in the mirror, where am I looking next? Where's the brake? Those sort of things. And then we become good enough, that proficient enough that we can just get in the car and drive. It's a bit like that with every skill that we do in financial services. It needs to be so good that it's just second nature. So working on that when you first come into the industry is key. Developing your skills, developing knowledge. We're in an industry where there are competitors that have the same products, the same market as us. What sets us aside? And what sets us aside is being polished. Hence the title of my book, Diamond Method. It's polishing that gemstone. So it's cut well, it shines well, it's the best it can possibly be. And I think that's something key for someone coming in new, asking lots of questions, being a sponge, absorbing information, talking to your peers, finding out who are the best people in your company, people that you want to emulate, people that you want to aspire to be. Go and spend time with them. I'm sure they'll give you some time. Sit down, have a cup of coffee and tea with them, and just pick up some few tidbits about how to develop and grow within your business.
Perfect. Sounds great. And from that stage, let's say there is a person who has come in, put in the effort, and like you said, activity being key, has done the activity and is getting and seeing himself get in front of clients. Where would you go from there? What would you say would be some of the things that the advisor could do to elevate his game? One of the things that we often hear many advisors say, who've been in the profession for, let's say, maybe a few years, maybe 2, 3, 4 years, is I'd like to get to the next level. So how do you actually get to that next level? What are your recommendations, suggestions or pathways that they could take?
Okay, so again, I think like in any business, you need to know where you're coming from to know where you're going to. So keeping a record of what you're doing every single day is very important. I still have my diaries from 1992 when I arrived in UAE, for instance. So I can tell you what meetings I had on what day. I know my statistics. I know how many phone calls I made to get to an appointment, how many appointments I made to get a first meeting, how many first meetings I did to get a fact find, how many fact finds to get a closing meeting, how many closing meetings to get a sale. I know who I sold to, I know what product I sold, I know the average premiums, I know the commission rates, I know the type of products, I know the nationalities, age, and so on and so forth. Now I've kept those really from 1992, and I normally use that when I do a seminar or if I'm doing a training session. I would bring in my statistics and show people because they're real. It shows them actually what you did, but it shows where I started from and what I did. So I've got a good idea and understanding of the local market. And I did that in every country I went to. So not just the UAE, wherever you go in the world, it doesn't matter, but it's understanding your business first and foremost. And what I've seen over the years in the industry is that most people in their first year, they can be very, very active. And they get a certain result, let's say, in year one. But as long as they're consistent and they continue to be active, what you find in year two is they normally double the revenue that they did in year one. Now, why is that? Normally, it's because you've kept in contact with the people you met in the first year, and sometimes you're not in the right place at the right time. But in the second year, it is the right place at the right time. Yeah. So you pick up business from the first year's activity on top of the second year's activity. Now, interestingly, what you then see in year 3, a lot of people in the industry plateau. Their income starts to level out. And it happens for a number of reasons. But one of the main reasons is they find out that because their skill is improved, their knowledge is improved, they can get the same results with less effort. So what we see is their activity levels start to drop, but their income levels remain the same because they're now identifying the right prospects and contacts. They're getting referrals. They're able to close business without as much effort. Of course, by doing that, they're losing out on potential revenue because they could be doubling their income again. And this is where you need coaches. And this is where it's really important in a business. You mentioned how do you increase your business in the future? Have a good coach. Any good business today, anywhere in the world, requires a good coach. Someone who's going to come in and look at what's going on. If you think about, someone who wants to play decent music at a high level, someone who wants to play elite sport, they all have coaches, people to help them. And it's no different in our industry. So making sure that you have either your internal coaches or you find your own coach externally, whatever works for you is important. So why would that help you? Because they will look at your business and they'll get you to start to focus. So looking at, if you don't keep a record of your statistics, for instance, they probably would start with that. What are you doing? How much do you make revenue on each line of business that you do? How do we get to the next level? So it's working out where you spend time and you earn more money and where you spend time, you earn less money. Can we get more money from the areas which we're not making as much revenue from today? If not, why do we spend time in that area? Don't spend time in that area. Let's spend time in an area where you're making revenue, as an example. Then it's things like looking at your skills and knowledge. Are you as skillful as you could be? Are you as knowledgeable as you could be? If we could increase the skills and knowledge of your salespeople or your management, then it should increase the amount of business that we do. We should be able to get more business per call, more business per sell. The other way is upselling, of course, getting higher net worth clients. So how do we get to higher net worth clients? Again, we could talk about that, but again, that's the next way. At the moment, my clients on average are an X amount per month. How do I get to the level above? So it's identifying how we can get referred up. And again, there is a skill level for that to be able to do that. But there are ways and techniques to help you do
that. I hear you loud and clear. And I think that's some very good points that you brought out in terms of being able to be aware. So awareness of what you're doing, your activity, tracking it consistently, as well as looking at the skills and the needs and the kind of skills that you need to develop to be able to service and cater to the needs of the segment that you're sort of getting into. And that brings us nicely to the sort of next question that I have for you, which is, skills are important, right? And when we're looking to bring on board advisors, do you hire for someone who's got the right skill sets, or how do you look at the recruitment process or the hiring process when bringing on board advisors? It could be new advisors, it could be experienced advisors, or we could discuss both. But what do you look for?
Okay, so I think if you have a good system of recruitment, then you should have systems in place which allow you to narrow down the people you're interviewing. So having a good, maybe a psychometric test, some people use that. Maybe having the ability to look at business planning. If someone is already in the industry, then fill in a business plan. What did they do previously? What are their ratios? What are their records? What did they sell? How much did they sell? What was the premium? All that sort of thing. If they can't complete one of them, maybe you wonder why. If they can complete it, then you can start to look at the statistics and see whether they are made up, which in some cases they are. And you can probe that information to find out. And if you've got someone that is actually being very genuine, obviously that's the type of people that you're going to want to bring in. But that's not to say that I think it works both ways. You've got two different things. If you're bringing someone in that's new to the industry, it's easier to mold them to your way of working as a company. So that's quite nice. That's quite nice. They're fresh. They don't know anything else. They're going to come in. You're going to show them what to do, and they'll do what you ask them to do. So that part of it's easy. The difficult part, of course, is it takes time, as we know, to get started in the industry. So you have to make them aware that it's like an apprenticeship. It might take them 1 or 2 years to get to the level that they might want to be. They need to understand that from outset. So again, in the interview process, as long as you're making them aware, so there's no secrets, kept back from them, that this is not an easy industry. Not everyone can do this. Making it very clear to them. However, the rewards outstrip the PAYE, salary version of working if you get it right. So, but if you bring someone in who's already experienced, then you have the opposite. You might have to retrain them, because again, depending on where they're coming from, they need to come into your system, to your product, to your environment. That also takes time. Some people find it very difficult to change. Some people are very, very good at change. So that becomes a bit of a challenge when you're recruiting someone from the industry. Someone who's been successful somewhere else as well, getting them to maybe work the way you want to work may be difficult if they've already had previous success. So there are different challenges for sure with people that are experienced. But having said that, if they've already been in the industry, they've got a book of business, they understand it. Obviously, it makes it a lot easier to bring those guys in, and they can work and develop within your organization. Again, it comes down to having the right contracts, because growth within an organization is about the contract you've got between you and your company. If you've got a company that has a contract that will allow you to grow and aspire to a really high level, then we can work long term, right? Because you don't want to keep jumping around from company to company either. You want to find a company that has got, fits for you, gives you the right, like a good marriage, all right? We don't get married for the wedding presents, I say. We get married for, right? Look at the person you're going to spend the rest of your life with. It's not the wedding gifts. It's who am I going to spend the rest. And I say that sometimes when I'm recruiting people, and that's what's important about the company. Look at the company. Don't look at what they might be offering you up front. All right. That's not what it's about. It's long term. What are you going to get over the next 10, 20, 30 years? Because if you can find the right company with the right contract that allows you to grow within them as you would like to grow, then you can really go for it.
Absolutely. I think you put it across in a way that I hope is easily understandable. And that was one of the segments and one of the questions that we were coming to. And I'm going to sort of drill a little deeper into that, right? We've got advisors. Let's say our advisor in his journey has come in. He's developed his skills. He's got a great manager who's taken him through. What are the things, and like you mentioned, looking at the company is important. If you were to look at a company as a financial advisor, and like you mentioned, what would be those things that you would look for when it came down to it? So if you had to choose a partner in that sense, what would you look for?
So if I was an advisor, I guess when I look at the company, I'd be looking for, are they regulated? Are they licensed and regulated? My experience, as you mentioned earlier, being in Hong Kong and Holland and here in the UAE, I did come across brokerages that weren't licensed and regulated. I can't remember how many companies I've seen come and go over the 30, 35, 36 years I've been in the industry. So many companies have come and gone because they weren't licensed, they weren't regulated, they weren't run professionally. So have a look at the company, have a look at the reputation, have a look at the board of directors. Who are they? What are they doing? Where have they come from? Do your due diligence on that company. Look for good. Do they match your way of thinking, your morals? So I think that's very important. Do they give you the opportunity to grow within your organization if you want to grow? And when I say grow, I mean if you're a self-employed person within a business, you're buying, you're into a franchise. Your franchise makes more revenue. Is there a better revenue share with that company as you grow? Does it give you the opportunity to maybe grow new legs if you want to go into management, for instance, and build a business within a business? Do they offer that? So look for that in a company. What's the reputation? If you know the providers, talk to the providers. What's the reputation of the company? Is it an equal opportunity organization? In various parts of the world, you still have companies that may not give you the equal opportunities, but depending on where you're from, your nationality. I see that. I've been very fortunate. I've worked with companies that gives everyone the opportunity. It doesn't matter what school you went to, where you were educated, what nationality, what age you are. No. And I think that's very important in a multinational, multicultural organization for people, especially in the UAE. But there are companies out there that will specialize in certain areas of recruitment. So find the one that fits for you. I think that's also very important. The environment, when you go in for your interview, just feel the environment that you're in. At Continental, it makes me smile when I come into the office. It's a nice office to come into. It's nice people, nice environment. It's friendly. It's a family feel. Some people would like that. Some people might like the more office environment, more aggressive environment, the young environment. I'm not giving any names away, but the dark suit, the white shirt, the red tie, the white socks, or whatever it might be. Get in at 8 a.m, leave at 5, and don't leave without your manager knowing. That there is that type of environment. Well, some people might need that type of sort of, what's the word? They might need that sort of direction, if you like.
Yeah.
So again, look for that organisation. What fits for you. I think that's important. And once you've got those things, so company's regulated, company's got a great reputation, it's got good leadership, it's got the right contracts for you, it allows you to do what you want to do, and the environment for you to work in. I think those are sort of the key bits. And then anything other than that is just a bit of icing on the cake, really.
Yeah, I think you've outlined those things very, very well. One thing that I'm going to sort of ask this across state, because we see this so much in our, especially in the marketplace in the UAE and many other parts of the world, I suspect. But long-term thinking versus short-term gain. What are the downsides of someone, let's say an advisor, looking at that? Because very often, we hear the stories of someone who's offering, X percentage more. And so for an advisor to make that decision, what would he give up, or what would he be giving up if he's just going in for a higher commission?
Okay. So again, there are two things I mentioned before: the wedding. You're getting married for the bride, not for the wedding present. So the gifts up front, forget that. And you can keep jumping around, but that's not really going to help you. A bit like a marriage, because you don't want those many divorces, I can assure you. But taking that analogy away, I think there's two things here. One, if you've run your own financial services companies, as I have, there's a different outlook for you. There's a different understanding for a business. And I think sometimes people forget that they're self-employed. They forget they're in the industry to have a business within a business. Sometimes they think and act like an employee, and they forget that the company's got to make enough money to sustain and to be there for you, to support you. So I think you have to take a step back and think, hang on a moment, I can get 5% more over here for the next year, but that company might not be there in 5 years' time. Or I can stay where I am, and I know the company's going to be there for the next 10 or 20 years. Because usually if someone it's a bit like going to a bank. If they're paying higher rates of interest, there's normally a reason. I'll give an example. When I was in Holland, there's a bank called Bank of BCCI, which actually was based in UAE. And they suddenly started paying 1 or 2% interest more than anyone else. And everyone started flooding into putting money into this bank. And I said, hold on a moment, to my clients, hold on, let me do a bit more research on this bank. And I decided, I found out that they had a lot of bad debt. They'd lent a lot of money to companies and businesses in South America that were in trouble. And the only way that they had more money that was lent than they had on deposit, they were in trouble. The only way they could do to help themselves was to get more money on deposit, which was to offer more interest rate to attract money in. But of course, ultimately, the bank collapsed. And when it collapsed, it meant the investors lost their money, right?
Yeah.
So when something's too good, then it means probably there's a reason for that. Too good to be true. Why? There's probably a reason. So again, just think of that. Why are they offering you more? What is it they're doing? Because every company needs a margin, and that margin is to help the company. So I think that's important. The other thing I'd say is jumping from company to company. I haven't seen anyone that has really attained the highest possible level in our industry by jumping from company to company. I haven't. They might look like they're doing well short term, but long term, I'm talking, a lot of them in 10, 20, 30 years, sticking with a company and growing with the company, you will out earn your revenue than you would jumping from company to company for that small increase. That's my advice. That's what I've seen.
Yeah, I agree. And from a client perspective as well, it doesn't give a lot of confidence for clients. I mean, I think clients will sort of look at it. Okay, I mean, here's an advisor who's moving from practice to practice. Either he isn't selecting the right organizations, or he doesn't get the right organizations, or they're letting go of him, which is why he has to switch. So yeah, from a longer term perspective, I can definitely see the benefits of being able to, like you say, choose the right partner and then stick with that relationship. So we've looked at it from that side, that is the advisor side. Let's look at it from a company perspective in terms of things that they do wrong. What are the mistakes that you see companies make, especially when managing advisors and talent? They're not like every other employee or the staff that we have in our companies. There is a difference in terms of the approach, entrepreneurial in sense. So what are the things that you're seeing that the companies aren't doing right? And, what changes do you think that they should be making so that there's a great home for advisors in their company?
Again, that can be split into two areas, really. I think there's the actual, the hiring and developing of agents, and then there is the management of the business itself. So if we take it from the agents and managers point of view, I think from day one, it's the people that they hire. First of all, it's hiring the right people, being able to hire the right people, having the right contracts to bring people in on, being honest and transparent from the beginning. Often you'll see companies making false claims to attract people in. And of course, once you're in and you're on a visa, it becomes more difficult to leave. Especially in the old days, it's becoming easier today, which is great. But in the old days, you're sort of a bit trapped, and they sort of knew that, so they've got you in. But of course, that doesn't really give you the right attitude and mentality from your agent. So I see that going wrong. And then I see ongoing development. Sometimes there's an induction course which is not really well structured at all, or they have a structured training course when you come in, but then there's no follow-up. The managers themselves are not trained and developed to develop those agents after they're onboarded. So it's really key. When we look at it, we look at the agent, we look at the trainer, and then we look at the manager, and we always discuss which is the most important and when. Yeah, and a lot of the time it's the actual manager when you finish the induction course. You can have the right candidate, the right attitude, you can have a really good training course, but if nothing happens after the induction course, then it could fall flat. And it's really key. We used to call it the 3-3-3 syndrome. the first 3 weeks when someone comes in on the training course, the first 3 months when the agent is actually out in the field, and the first 3 years, because do they continue in the industry? So that's really important. But the manager is the one who's key after the first 3 weeks of induction. It's easy to sit in a training room, classroom, and listen and pass exams. It's relatively easy compared to actually going out in the field and facing the client. So the managers are important. The company needs to realize that, and they need to, again, develop their people, develop their consultants, as well as their managers, more importantly, their managers, having key managers. But it does depend on the strategy of the company. Are they looking for a boutique type of company, small, well-educated, well-motivated people? Then you might not need that model of having the managers and the structures. But if you've got a company that wants to grow and develop, then they need tiers of management. Then yes, that becomes really, really important for them. Structures. I'd say the next thing would be things like structures. It should be structured. Again, I see a lot of companies that are not structured. So, keeping people motivated and understanding that they should have a structured diary so that they can see enough people. At the end of the day, we can only sell if we're in front of people, right? So if 1 week there's a meeting on a certain day and next week on a different day and so on, it's very difficult for the salesperson to manage their diaries and their managers. So I think we have to keep that in the forefront of your mind as a business. Are we maximizing the time that these guys can be out in front, face to face with customers? That's got to be the number one. Everything else is there to support that. Making sure that the training and development is specific to the requirement of the agent or manager. Again, often you'll see companies that will do blanket training across the whole sales force, okay, and you've got half the people in the room already really good, they're competent, they don't need to be sat in that room, they just get bored. Why am I sat here? So again, understanding the standard of education and the needs of your sales force and make your training specific to their requirements would make you a lot more effective. Use the people you've got in your organization to train and help other people. You don't necessarily have to be a trainer or a manager. Your colleagues can also help and support you. So again, keeping statistics, who's got the best ratios? Who's the best at making telephones? Who's the best at closing? Who's the best at selling insurance? Who's the best at that? Who is it? If we've got that information, we can use that with the other, accelerated learning. I could go on actually so much. I could talk about that.
Maybe we'll do a separate episode on that.
Yeah.
Explore it in a little more detail, but very, very interesting.
Just quickly on the company side, because you asked about the other side of the company side, is not to be confusing. I've seen many companies that keep changing, for instance, their commission structures. I've seen companies that have changed commission structure 2 or 3 times in 1 year. And it just completely confuses the sales force. So what's going on? What am I on this week? What am I on next week? Again, you want them focused and concentrating on doing what they get paid to do, which is going out to meet people and closing them. Not to be thinking what's going to happen next week or this week. So I think having a proper structure and keeping people focused on what they're meant to be doing is really key. And I see companies getting that wrong. And I think once you've got a structure in place, you work with it, you run with it, you stick with it, and maintain what you're doing. Sometimes you hear people say, "Oh, we used to do that." If something worked, keep using it. Keep using it, And it's a shame, isn't it? Sometimes you hear that thing, "Oh, we used to." And why did we stop doing that? Oh, I don't know. So having companies sort of think, "Yeah, this work," keeping it going. And I think companies that chop and change, it makes the sales force a bit uncomfortable if you're going to try and build your career. And at the end of the day, it's their business within your business, and we shouldn't forget that. As a company owner, yes, it's my business, but it's also their business. I only become more successful if they're successful. So the more people I can make successful, the more successful we will be.
I couldn't agree with you more. Coming back to one last thing before we we look at closing this out, social media. And in the context of the success that advisors can achieve, how important do you think it is? Any tips or advice for the financial advisors in terms of using social media?
Yeah, again, I think, in today's age, social media is fantastic, right? There's so much now that we can get our message out to so many people, and we can use things like LinkedIn to find out about clients. People will say, "Oh, it's different today. It was easier in your day." No, it wasn't. We didn't have LinkedIn. You got a telephone book. Good luck. Off you go. It's just look. The environment changes. We have to change with it, right? It's always going to be hard. There's always going to be challenges. There's always going to be obstacles. It's just different. The challenges change, obstacles change, but it's always going to be that's the environment we're in. It is. But we have to be good at social media today. There's no doubt about that. I mean, we're doing this interview podcast now, aren't we? For instance. So we wouldn't be doing this 35 years ago. So it's moved on. So we move on with so I think it's important. And obviously, it's a great way to spread your message and to get your name in front of people that you wouldn't ordinarily meet, for sure. But then the quality of the material you use, the quality of your video has got to be really good, right? Because there are a lot of people doing it. There's so many people doing it, right? So how do I make mine different? But it doesn't mean it has to be your content. You could use a company content, company videos, company messages. We can be very clever and smart, but at the same time, brand it with our own name and our own contact details. And some people might not feel comfortable in front of the camera. So, use the company to do it for you. Some people may not feel comfortable in an interview, maybe don't feel comfortable standing up in front of people. All these things, again, they can be trained and developed, which is part of our development. But in the meantime, if you've got a company luckily, the guys here at Continental, they have that opportunity. I've looked at your videos; they're fantastic. You can cut and paste and use what you want for your own marketplace, and I think we need to do that. And I think, like you say, it is the way forward. People today, if you contact them, they're going to be searching you. Who are you? Won't they? They'll be on LinkedIn. Who's this person? They'll be on your website. Who's this person? Make sure your website is current. Another part, I think, for a company and for you as an individual. Make sure it's current and up to date. And give as much information as you can, because people will look you up. The other thing I think content should be, if you're doing mass media, keeping the content slick, sharp, to the point is also important. People aren't going to look at necessarily 20-minute videos or but if it's a sort of 30-second, 1 minute sort of little podcast, little thing, I think that they work really well. Definitely.
Yep, and they're super easy to do now with the technology in our pockets. I think everyone has access to the tools that are required. It's just a matter of being able to sit down and get the work done. Before we close this episode, Andy, why don't you give us a little bit of insight and tell us a little bit about your book?
Oh, The Diamond Method.
Yeah.
In all good bookstores, available in all good bookstores now. I'll tell you how it came about. One of the providers, very kindly, a few years ago, introduced me to a coach. We were talking about having good coaches, and I took that advice myself, of course. And I had a coach come in from South Africa every 3 months and would sit with me, and we would plan the company and the structures and what we're trying to do. But it also challenged me on my goals and my aims and so on. And one of the aims I had was to write a book. I always wanted to write a book. I've been in the industry a long time. And she challenged me and said, right, I want the first chapter of a book written next quarter. And I was reading up on my notes, like a well-structured business owner that I was. About 2 weeks before she's due in, I thought, oh my God, I haven't done that book chapter. So I thought, what am I going to do? Because she was quite challenging. She was very good at her job, but I knew she's not going to let me get away with it. So I had a training course that I wrote many years ago when I came to the UAE, and was used for a blue chip company for their training development, and it worked. We managed to recruit a lot of people. We became the largest sales force in the UAE, in fact. But a lot of it was down to the induction course as well, getting people in and established. So I thought, why not turn that into a book? So that's how the book came about. I already had most of the information there. So I turned it into a chapter and said, oh, look, I've written part of my book. And she said, oh, yeah, that's quite good. So that's how it came about. But then I had to finish it.
Yeah.
And the other reason I did it was a friend of mine wrote a book as well. And I thought, well, if he can do it, I can do it. So I wrote the Diamond Method, and I used it as a way of helping people come into my company. When they came in, they got all the induction information, but they also copied the book as well. And it's a sort of self-help book. It's a ready record. It's not very, it's quite short. It's concise, but you can just look it up and say, right, I'm going to go and do a closing meeting. Look at a few tips that Andy's put in there. It mentions the type of books. It talks about the type of company that you should work with. It talks about, how to deal with multicultural people as well, and all those sort of things that I've learned as I've been in the UAE, adapted and put into that book. But it is a self-help sales book, the first one. There are a couple of concepts in there. I have got a couple of other books that I want to write that lead on from this. One is concept selling, one is fact finding, and the next one is coaching managers, coaching the coaches. So that's my next project.
That's great, and I wish you all the very best. Hopefully, we'll get to see a copy of your next book soon. But thank you so much for being on the show, Andy, and it was a pleasure to obviously have a good conversation with you. I hope you had an enjoyable time as well.
Yeah, it's very good. Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right, that was our guest for today, Mr. Andrew Cole, who is an experienced expert in the financial services profession, having both run a business as well as worked and trained many professionals in the profession. So if you like the content that you're seeing, do hit the like and subscribe button. Subscribe to our podcast, follow us on YouTube and the other social channels. We really look forward to receiving your support, your questions, your inputs, your feedback, so that we can both improve the podcast as well as grow the audience that we can reach. Thank you once again, and have a great day.